What happens when Hollywood's most iconic tough guy meets a late-night host who thinks he can push anyone around? Well, you're about to find out exactly how that explosive encounter went down. And trust me, you won't believe what Stephen Colbert said that made Sylvester Stallone absolutely lose his mind on live television. But before we dive into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below because this is going to be one wild ride. The green room at the Late Show was buzzing with the usual pre-show energy when Sylvester Stallone arrived for what was supposed to be a routine promotional appearance. The 77-year-old actor had been making the rounds to promote his latest project, and his publicist had assured him this would be a friendly, light-hearted interview. Stallone, dressed in a sharp navy suit that still showed off his legendary physique, was reviewing his talking points when a production assistant approached him with a concerned expression. "Mr. Stallone, there's been a slight change to the interview format," the young woman said nervously, clutching her clipboard. "Mr. Colbert wants to discuss some topics that weren't on the original list we sent your team." Stallone looked up from his notes, his famous squint more pronounced. "What kind of topics are we talking about here?" The production assistant shifted uncomfortably. "He mentioned wanting to talk about your political views, some controversies from the 80s, and he specifically asked about your relationship with certain former business partners." "Hold on," Stallone said, standing up to his full height. "My publicist was very clear about what we'd be discussing tonight. This was supposed to be about my new film, and maybe some fun stories from the Rocky days. Nothing political, nothing controversial." "I understand, sir, but Mr. Colbert feels that his audience deserves a more substantive conversation. He said something about not wanting to do another puff piece interview." Stallone felt his jaw tighten. He'd been doing interviews for over 4 decades, and he knew when someone was trying to ambush him. "Get my publicist in here right now, and tell Colbert I want to speak with him before we go on." The production assistant scurried away, leaving Stallone alone with his growing frustration. He'd dealt with difficult interviewers before, but there was usually some professional courtesy involved. You didn't change the entire format of an interview 30 minutes before showtime without discussing it with the guest's representatives. 20 minutes later, Stephen Colbert walked into the green room with his characteristic confident stride, but there was something different about his demeanor. Instead of the warm, welcoming host persona he usually displayed, there was a cold calculation in his eyes that immediately put Stallone on edge. "Sly, great to see you," Colbert said, extending his hand with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I hope you're ready for a real conversation tonight. My audience is tired of celebrities coming on and just plugging their projects without any substance." Stallone didn't take the offered hand. "Stephen, my publicist and your producers had an agreement about what we'd be discussing. I'm here to talk about my work, not to be your political punching bag." Colbert's smile faded slightly. "Look, I respect your work, I really do, but you're a public figure who's made some questionable statements over the years. My job is to ask the questions my audience wants answered, not to give you a free commercial for your movie." "Questionable statements?" Stallone's voice took on that familiar rasp that had made him famous. "What exactly are you referring to?" "Well, there's your support for certain political figures, your comments about Hollywood liberals, your past business dealings. These are legitimate topics of discussion for someone in your position." Stallone could feel his temper rising, but he kept his voice controlled. "My political views are my own business, and I've never hidden them. But that's not what this interview was supposed to be about. If you want to do some kind of gotcha journalism, find someone else." Colbert stepped closer, and his voice took on a condescending tone. "Come on, Sly, you're tougher than this. You've played some of the most badass characters in movie history. Surely you can handle a few challenging questions from a talk show host?" "This isn't about being tough," Stallone replied, his famous intensity beginning to surface. "This is about professional respect and keeping your word, something you apparently don't understand." The tension in the room was becoming palpable. Colbert's producers, who had been watching from the doorway, exchanged nervous glances. This was not how these pre-interview meetings were supposed to go. Professional respect? Colbert laughed, but there was no humor in it. You want to talk about professional respect? How about the respect you showed to all those stunt performers who got hurt on your sets because you insisted on doing things the dangerous way? How about the respect you showed to your co-stars when you demanded script changes that gave you more screen time? Stallone's eyes narrowed dangerously. You don't know what you're talking about. Every decision I made on those sets was about making the best movie possible. I never put anyone at risk unnecessarily. Really? Because I have some interviews here with former crew members who might disagree with that assessment, Colbert said, pulling out a folder from behind his back. Funny how you always seem to be the common denominator in these incidents. Where did you get those? Stallone demanded, his voice rising for the first time. I'm a journalist, Sly. I do my research. And what I found about your behavior on set, your treatment of women in the industry, your business practices, it paints a very different picture than the tough guy with a heart of gold image you've been selling for decades. The accusation hung in the air like a loaded gun. Stallone had faced criticism before, but this felt different. This felt personal and calculated in a way that went beyond normal interview preparation. You want to play games with me? Stallone said, his voice dropping to that menacing whisper that had terrified movie villains for decades. You think you can ambush me with some cherry-picked stories from disgruntled employees and make yourself look like some kind of investigative hero? Colbert seemed to relish the rising tension. I'm not playing games, Sly. I'm doing my job. You see, the problem with actors like you is that you think your celebrity status makes you untouchable. You think you can come on my show, charm the audience with a few anecdotes, and walk away without ever being held accountable for your actions. Accountable for what, exactly? Stallone shot back. For creating characters that inspired millions of people? For working my ass off to build a career from nothing? For giving everything I had to every role I ever played? For building that career on the backs of people you stepped on along the way? Colbert replied coldly. Do you want to talk about the young screenwriters whose ideas you allegedly stole? The actors you had fired because they got better reviews than you? The directors you undermined because they wouldn't bow to your ego? Stallone took a step forward, and for a moment the room felt like it might explode. You're making accusations without any proof, and you're doing it because you know I can't defend myself against vague allegations. This is character assassination, pure and simple. Character assassination? Colbert laughed harshly. Your character assassinated itself years ago. I'm just shining a light on it. You know what the real problem is? You can't handle the fact that your time is over. The tough guy act doesn't work anymore. Audiences are smarter now. They see through the facade. The words hit Stallone like a physical blow. After nearly 50 years in the business, after creating some of the most beloved characters in cinema history, to be dismissed so casually was more insulting than any professional slight he'd ever endured. My time is over? Stallone's voice was deadly quiet now. Let me tell you something, you smug, self-righteous piece of garbage. I was making movies that mattered when you were still trying to figure out how to be funny. Rocky, Rambo. These characters have touched more lives than your little late-night comedy show ever will. Colbert's eyes lit up with malicious glee. He'd gotten under Stallone's skin, and he was going to press the advantage. Touched lives, is that what you call it? Because I call it selling simple-minded fantasies to people who can't handle complex reality. Your movies are comfort food for the intellectually lazy. Comfort food? Stallone was incredulous. Rocky was about a nobody who got a shot at greatness and gave everything he had. Rambo was about a veteran struggling with trauma and abandonment. These stories meant something to people because they were real. They came from real pain and real hope. Oh, please, Colbert waved dismissively. They were formulaic hero fantasies designed to make money. The underdog boxer, the one-man army. It's all the same tired machismo wrapped up in different packages. You found a formula that worked, and you milked it for everything it was worth. And what do? Stallone fired back. You sit behind a desk and make jokes about people who are actually out there trying to create something meaningful. You're a parasite who feeds off other people's work and pretends it makes you important. Colbert's facade finally cracked, and real anger flashed across his face. A parasite? I inform people. I hold powerful figures accountable. I give people a way to process the insanity of the world through humor and insight. What do? You make loud, dumb movies for people who don't want to think. Loud and dumb? Stallone's voice was rising again. You want to know what's loud and dumb? It's a guy who thinks he's some kind of moral authority because he can read jokes off a teleprompter. You're not a journalist. You're not an intellectual. You're a court jester who got too big for his costume. The insult clearly stung, and Colbert stepped closer, his voice turning venomous. At least I'm not a washed-up action star desperately trying to convince people he's still relevant. Face it, Sly. Nobody cares about your tough guy routine anymore. The world has moved on, but you're still stuck in 1976, throwing punches at meat in a freezer. That was the breaking point. Stallone had endured the professional insults, the character attacks, even the dismissal of his life's work. But the reference to Rocky's training montage, delivered with such sneering contempt, felt like a desecration of something sacred. You son of a bitch, Stallone snarled, his famous intensity now fully unleashed. That freezer scene represented everything that was pure about fighting for your dreams. The fact that you can reference it and completely miss the point shows exactly what kind of shallow, cynical fraud you really are. Colbert seemed to realize he'd pushed too far, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. I hit a nerve, didn't I? The truth usually does. You know what your real legacy is going to be? Not Rocky, not Rambo, but this moment right here, when you showed the world that underneath all that movie star polish, you're just another thin-skinned celebrity who can't handle criticism. Criticism? Stallone was barely containing his rage. Now. This isn't criticism. This is a hit job. You brought me here under false pretenses so you could try to humiliate me on national television. Well, congratulations, you got your moment. But let me tell you something about real toughness versus your fake intellectual superiority complex. Real toughness isn't about making clever jokes at other people's expense, Stallone continued, his voice carrying the weight of decades of experience. It's about getting knocked down and getting back up. It's about facing rejection and failure and still believing in yourself. It's about putting your heart into your work, even when people like you are waiting to tear it apart. Colbert tried to regain his composure, but the mask had slipped too completely. Save the inspirational speech for your fans, Sly. The truth is you're an actor who got lucky with a few roles and then spent the rest of your career desperately trying to recapture that lightning in a bottle. And now you're reduced to doing publicity tours for movies nobody really wants to see. Nobody wants to see. Stallone's laugh was bitter and dangerous. You really don't get it, do you? You think success is measured by the approval of people, like you, critics and commentators who never created anything themselves. But real success is connecting with audiences, giving them something that speaks to their struggles and their dreams. Oh, the noble artist routine, Colbert sneered. How convenient. Every time someone points out the flaws in your work or your behavior, you wrap yourself in this flag of artistic integrity. But we both know what this is really about. It's about money and ego, just like everything else in Hollywood. Stallone shook his head slowly, and when he spoke, his voice carried a sadness that cut through the anger. You know what the tragedy is here, Stephen? You actually have talent. You're smart, you're articulate, you have a platform that reaches millions of people. But instead of using that gift to build something positive, you use it to tear people down. You've become exactly the kind of bitter, destructive force that makes this business so toxic? The unexpected shift to something approaching pity seemed to unbalance Colbert more than any of the previous attacks. Don't you dare lecture me about using my platform responsibly. I hold people accountable. I ask the hard questions that soft interviewers are afraid to ask. Hard questions? Stallone's intensity was building to a crescendo. You want to ask hard questions? How about this one? When did you decide that cruelty was more important than truth? When did you choose to become someone who gets off on humiliating people for entertainment? I'm not cruel, I'm honest, Colbert shot back, but his voice lacked conviction now. The difference is that honesty sometimes hurts, and people like you can't handle it when someone refuses to kiss your ass. Honesty? Stallone stepped closer, and the full force of his presence filled the room. Honest would be admitting that you brought me here tonight with one goal: to create a moment that would go viral, to generate controversy that would boost your ratings. You don't care about accountability or journalism. You care about being the guy who took down Sylvester Stallone. The accusation hung in the air, and for the first time Colbert seemed genuinely rattled. The questions I planned to ask were legitimate. Were they? Stallone pressed. Or were they designed to provoke exactly this kind of reaction? You wanted the tough guy to lose his temper, didn't you? You wanted to be able to sit there with your smug smile and watch me explode so you could play the victim afterward. Colbert's silence was answer enough, and Stallone nodded grimly. That's what I thought. You know what the difference is between us, Stephen? When I created Rocky, I put my own pain and struggles into that character. Every punch he threw, every moment of doubt, every small victory that came from something real. But you feed off other people's pain. You're a vampire who dresses up his blood-sucking as public service. You're being ridiculous, Colbert managed, but his voice was shaky now. This is just an interview, not some cosmic battle between good and evil. You're right, Stallone said quietly. It's not cosmic. It's small. It's petty. It's a mediocre talent trying to make himself feel important by destroying something better than himself. And the sad thing is, you probably don't even realize how pathetic that makes you. The words hit Colbert like physical blows, and for a moment something vulnerable flickered across his face. But then his defensive arrogance reasserted itself. Better than myself? You're delusional if you think your action movie career makes you morally superior to me. It's not about the movies, Stallone replied. It's about what you choose to do with the gifts you've been given. I chose to try to inspire people, to give them heroes they could believe in, to show them that ordinary people could do extraordinary things if they had the courage to try. What did you choose? You chose to be a professional cynic who mistakes cruelty for cleverness. Colbert straightened up, trying to regain his authority. Well, this has been illuminating, but we still have a show to do. Are you going to honor your commitment, or are you going to storm out like a prima donna? Stallone looked at him for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was calm and final. I'm going to walk out of here with my dignity intact. You can tell your audience whatever story you want about why I'm not on your show tonight. But we both know the truth. You had a chance to have a real conversation with someone who's lived an extraordinary life, and instead you chose to try to score cheap points for your own ego. He turned toward the door, then paused and looked back. You know what, Stephen? I actually feel sorry for you. Because at the end of the day, when all the laughter dies down and the cameras stop rolling, you have to live with being the kind of person who gets his kicks from trying to humiliate others. That's not a legacy I'd want to leave behind. And, with that, Sylvester Stallone walked out of the Late Show green room, leaving Stephen Colbert standing alone with the wreckage of what should have been a simple promotional interview. The producers scrambled to find a replacement guest, but the damage was done. Word of the confrontation spread quickly through the industry, and while Colbert tried to spin it as Stallone being unable to handle tough questions, those who knew The real story understood what had actually happened. So there you have it. The incredible true story of what happened when Stephen Colbert tried to ambush Sylvester Stallone and got more than he bargained for. It's a reminder that sometimes the tough guy really is the good guy, and that real strength isn't about throwing punches, it's about standing up for what's right. Make sure to subscribe for more incredible stories like this one, and let me know in the comments. Do you think Stallone was right to walk out, or should he have stayed and faced the questions?